Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today for our school year 2021-2022 Program Options and Operations webinar. We will be getting started here in just a moment, but as everyone is joining us here on the line, I'm going to quickly go over some housekeeping items before we get started with today's program. Carolyn, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so just a couple of items here. First up, this webinar is being recorded. It will be hosted on our website and also sent out shortly after this webinar airs in an email to all registered attendees, along with the slide deck that you are seeing here today. If you have any comments, feel free to put them into the chat box, and any questions that you have for our panelists throughout today's presentation, please make sure those go into the Q&A box. There will be time for audience Q&A at the very end of the webinar. There's also closed captioning available for this webinar, so if that is something that you would like, you should see a button at the bottom of your screen that either says live transcript, closed captioning, or just CC. Feel free to click on that and you should be able to see closed captioning. All right, I think it looks like we have most people on the line here with us now, so I'll get us started with today's program. We'll start with introductions. My name is Chelsea McCormick. I am a program associate for Share Our Strengths No Kid Hungry campaign, and we have three wonderful panelists here with us today. First up will be Carolyn Vega. She is our senior manager for Share Our Strengths No Kid Hungry campaign. Following her will be Laura Alvarez, Director of Dining Services at Tolleson Elementary School, District number 17 in Arizona. And lastly will be Beth Morris. She's the Director of School Nutrition at Lynchburg City Schools in Virginia. And with that, I'll pass it over to Carolyn to get us started.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. So just a quick rundown of our agenda. I'm going to start off with an overview of the waivers and program options available for the coming school year, just to quickly level set and make sure everyone's on the same page. There's been a lot of waivers and Q&A guidance to keep up with, so we just want to quickly cover that. And then we'll get to see those in action with two districts that have graciously agreed to share their plans, even though, as I'm sure you all know and are experiencing, things are still in flux and coming into place for the coming school year. So we'll hear first from Laura in Arizona and then from Beth in Virginia. I'll do some Q&A with them first, and so that'll be your cue to start entering your questions into the Q&A box because then we'll have time for your questions at the end. And we'll just quickly wrap up with some resources before we close out today. So with that, let's dive into these waiver and program options. So these waivers are available for the full school year, and USDA guidance has made clear that these will be available for the full school year and will not end before June 30th of next year or whenever the school year ends. So the first and the biggest one is the option for all schools to operate the seamless summer option this coming school year. And kind of baked into that waiver is an area eligibility waiver. So they've said kind of no matter where you are, no matter what your free or reduced price eligibility percentage is, you can operate the seamless summer option. Not only that, all of those meals will be reimbursed at the summer food service program rate, and they've further specified that it will be the higher rural self-prep rate versus the vended meal rate. So SFSP is not an option. So going back to more of the typical school year operations and administration with the seamless summer option, but at least you're getting that high SFSP rate, even though you can't actually operate the SFSP this coming school year. On top of those waivers, there's also an area eligibility waiver for CACFP at-risk after-school meals, as well as MSLP after-school snacks. So that allows for after-school meals and snacks free of charge at the free reimbursement rate, regardless of location, everywhere this coming school year. And then in addition, there is some flexibility for state agency reviews of school food authorities operating the seamless summer option this coming school year. So a little bit of recognition that the review requirements are going to be a little bit different from the state agency, given that many will be operating seamless summer and not the school meals programs like usual. We also have some meal pattern waivers available for the coming school year. First, there's an offer versus serve waiver for high school. So ordinarily high schools have to implement offer versus serve, but in recognition of the fact that there may be grab and go meals or just simplified service within schools, that is waived for the coming school year. There is a broader meal pattern waiver for the seamless summer option available through September 30th, but that will end on September 30th. And beginning October 1st through the end of the school year, there is a more limited meal pattern waiver. And that is targeted at the sodium requirements as well as whole grains, milk variety, vegetable subgroups, and age grade groups. USDA guidance has said that they expect every school to be approved for a sodium waiver if requested, in recognition of the fact that there may be some more packaged foods and other circumstances that may make it difficult to meet those sodium guidelines this coming school year. But the other areas where the waiver is possible, whole grains, milk variety, vegetables, and age grade groups, those will be considered on a case-by-case basis. So definitely not as broad as the meal pattern waivers have been to date, but still there should you need them. And especially helpful if, again, there are grab and go meals and things like that happening in the coming year. So related, these waivers are available for the coming year, but with a caveat that they're only available to the extent and for the duration needed. And those waivers are the non-congregate meal service waiver, the meal service time waiver, and the parent or guardian meal pickup waiver. And these three waivers have kind of been the core of a lot of the alternative service models implemented since March of 2020. So they are still there, but USDA guidance has made clear that they expect normal operations as much as possible and that these would just be needed if alternative service models are required, whether in school because of safety and distancing protocols or out of school if there are virtual learners or school closures and things like that. And lastly, we have on-site monitoring waivers. And these are only available through 30 days after the end of the public health emergency. So at this point, we don't know what their expiration date is. Based on things we've heard, it seems pretty likely that they'll be available at least through the end of 2021, but unclear how long they may last after that. But again, you would have at least a 30-day grace period after that's announced to transition back to fully in-person on-site monitoring. That said, there is nothing to stop you from doing on-site monitoring now if that is aligned with the safety protocols that you have in place for your staff and in your state and area. Or you could do a mix of things in person and things off-site that might traditionally be on-site. So there's some flexibility here. You can ask questions about that or refer to the original waivers and Q&A guidance if you need. So to kind of recap what these waivers mean for what you can do, these are your program options for each meal service. So for breakfast and lunch in the coming school year, your general options are you can stick with the school breakfast program and the National School Lunch Program, or you could operate the seamless summer option. Caveat there is in both cases, you can only do these on school days. Seamless summer you could use for unanticipated closures, but in general, they are limited to Monday through Friday school days. Now, the per meal limit in the seamless summer option still holds. So that is no more than a breakfast and a lunch per child per day, or one meal and one snack per child per day. So that is why I have it up there that breakfast and lunch is through seamless summer. It cannot be all the meals that you would ever want to serve in a day through seamless summer. But you can still serve that after school meal and or snack through CACFP at risk after school or NSLP. And of note here is that CACFP at risk can operate on both school days, weekdays, weekends, holidays, school breaks, and closures. So again, seamless summer is pretty limited in this coming school year. It's just meant to be that replacement for NSLP and the school breakfast program on school days, but CACFP at risk has a lot more flexibility that's an inherent part of it. that allows it to operate on weekends, holidays, breaks, and closures. So in addition to that added nutrition boost and being able to serve kids an after-school meal or snack on school days, this is your option for those other out-of-school times. So now is a great time to get approved to do after-school meals in this coming school year, because it really adds a lot of extra flexibility. And I also just want to quickly do a rehash here of some compare contrast from last school year to this school year. So again, just re-emphasizing, last year, the summer food service program was an option. This coming year, it is not. However, last year, if you did choose to operate Seamless Summer, your meals were reimbursed at those Seamless Summer rates. But this coming year, Seamless Summer meals will be reimbursed at the higher SFSP rural self-prep rates. And again, as I've been saying, last year, you could serve meals through SSO or SFFT on weekends, holidays, and breaks. But this year, it's only school days and unanticipated school closure. So no weekends, no breaks. This past year, you may have found in your state that the area eligibility waiver for SFSP, SSO, and CACFP at risk had to be targeted to some extent. Again, I know the implementation of that varied quite a bit by state in terms of what was necessary to get an area eligibility waiver. But the great thing about this coming year is that basically there is no such thing as area eligibility. SSO is available to all schools, and there is no targeting requirement for the area eligibility waiver for CACFP at risk or MSLP. So going on to the next one, this is another big difference and a kind of gray area. This past school year, non-congregate models were broadly permitted, but this coming year, usual operations are expected as much as possible. That said, you can work with your state agency based on what your need is, because again, the language in the waiver is to the extent and for the duration needed. And then lastly, there we have that there was a broad meal pattern waiver available this past school year based on supply chain issues, whereas this coming school year, it is more limited. And as I said, just covering sodium, whole grains, vegetables, milk variety, and age grade groups. And another thing I do want to note that is a similarity across these years, school food authorities may operate Seamless Summer at non-school sites. So that's going to be the same both this past year and this coming year. So if you want to serve out of a library or a Y and partner with other organizations in your community to serve SSO meals out and about, you can. Or you may operate Seamless Summer for enrolled students in school only. So ordinarily that's not an option through the summer meals programs for schools, but USDA has said that they acknowledge that in line with normal school operations that you can choose to use SSO just for your enrolled students. But with that and with everything that I've mentioned today, it is always best to check with your state agency for how these things are going to be implemented in your state. Just trying to, again, level set and give you all of the information about what's possible and what the USDA has said. But as a former state agency employee, I know things can look different in different states, so it's always best to check. So with that overview, let's see what this looks like in action. So again, we are happy to have 2 school districts with us here today to run down their plans for the coming school year. And they'll also give some perspective about what they've been doing over the past year so that you can kind of see how things are changing or staying the same for them. So first up, we are going to hear from Laura Alvarez with the Tarleton Elementary School District in Arizona. So Laura, if you want to come on and you can take it away.
Hi, everybody. Well, yes, I am Laura Alvarez, director at Tarleton Elementary School District, and we are located west side in Phoenix. So if you're familiar with Phoenix, we're about 5 miles to the stadiums, to the football stadiums. We are an urban area, high free and reduced population, about 89% free and reduced. We are a non-CEP district. We have 4 schools. They're all K through 8 with an enrollment of almost 3,000 students. And we are currently offering meals at 13 sites. Pre-COVID, we offered meals at 2 community sites. And since then, we've added 7 sites due to school closures. Next slide, please. with lots of challenges and lots of advertisements through radio stations, newspapers, weekly outcasts, district newsletters, and many promotions, we have probably served a little over 3 million meals. We have found that the best advertisement is talking directly to the family. So when they pick up meals, we let them know, hey, you know, on Thursday, we're going to serve pozole. Make sure you come and make sure you tell your friends and family if they have any children under 18. So this is, you know, due to our high participation. Also, 2 of our sites are located off 2 main streets. And 2 of my ladies, they like to go out there and flag down people, flag down the cars. And we ask them, do you have children? And come on in, and we're serving meals. So it's been pretty interesting, and we've had a great participation. So we serve Tuesdays. We serve two times a day, and we're sending out meals for 7 days a week. On Tuesday, we do meals for 3 days, and on Thursday, we do meals for 4 days. And the team usually comes in on Monday, and they start prepping for Tuesday, and for Tuesday distribution, and then the days off, well, that's when they usually prep meals. So in March, we had 75% of our students return to school because we were closed through almost the whole year. We came back with no salad bars and with a lot of mitigation process for our COVID. So we're serving everything in disposable plates now, disposable utensils, social distancing procedures. We had less students in the cafeteria. Our cafeteria times was gathered around, which was kind of challenging for us because we went from maybe a lunch service from 2 hours to maybe 4 hours. So the challenging part was there that now I had to scatter the staff around to come in later and some to come in earlier just to be prepared for the students. So I think that was part of our challenges. We also had a lot of support from our transportation team and from our community sites who came out and helped us to deliver our meals to our different sites. It would also help that we only have 75% of the students and not the whole 100% of the students. Next slide. So for this coming school year, we're going to continue with our COVID mitigation and practices, just as I mentioned, hoping to incorporate the salad bars in January of 2022, depending on, on our community and how COVID is doing. This time around, we're only going to serve Monday through Friday. We're planning to maybe doing the at-risk meals for the weekends and the holidays for our grab-and-go meals. So along with this, I think I forgot to mention that when we came back in March, we were also doing our grab-and-go curbside meals for our students who were distance learners. And we're going to continue that also when we come back in August in the fall. We will. Another challenging part for us have been the efforts to collect the meal applications. So since students are all free, since we're running the SSL or the seamless summer feeding, so it's been really difficult for the parents to turn in the applications. And we've done a lot of advertisement for that also. So we send out outcalls, emails with the link for our online application, flyers, district newsletters, everything you could think of, Facebook, social media, and with very little success on that. But this year we're gonna have a Meet the Teacher night, which we're hoping we have a good turnout that time, which we usually do when we have it, and we did not have the Meet the Teacher night last year. So for our at-risk meals, currently right now, we only have it planned for our 2 off-site locations, which is our Tolleson Parks and Recs and our library, because they host after-school programs. And as of now, the school has not said anything about having any students on site after school or any programs running. So unless their waiver comes through or anything, we'll do after-school meals. Our enrollment projections for when we come back is at 90%. So we'll still have our distance learnings and we'll continue with our grab-and-go curbside meals. Next slide, please. So in efforts to serve the whole community, other than federal programs, we partner with our local food bank, with St. Mary's Food Bank, Feeding America, which is also part of the Feeding America. So we we have a Saturday mobile pantry, which is mandated by all volunteers. So which we call it mobile because there's a semi-tractor that comes and drops off food for us. And with the volunteers, we pack it and then we distribute it. We do a drive-through distribution. And then from there, we also brought in a backpack program, which is more kind of a boxes, like boxes that we make for food for the families that has about 20 to 30 pounds of food. And this gives the family enough food for the weekend until students come back to school on Monday. And then we have an emergency food pantry for the families to come through. And all of this, it wasn't easy. To start the mobile pantry, it took us about 4 months. It involved an application, an interview, an on-site interview, and it was very extensive until we finally got approved and we were able to start it. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary back in May with our mobile pantry. And from there, then we picked up the backpack program, and which is also partnered with St. Mary's. And for the backpack programs, students are usually recommended, or families are recommended by teachers or administration, or even parents call in and they say that they need support. The emergency school pantry is also, we feel that it's very limited, and we fill that food with the items that we go and pick up on Fridays. So, and when a family calls that they need support, or when somebody refers the family, if they need emergency food like that day, then we give them what we have in the food pantry. We sign them up for our weekend backpack programs, and then we let them know about our Saturday distribution, because even though that the information is out and we send out calls and we advertise it, not a lot of families know about it until we let them know personally. So we plan to continue all of these programs through next year. So, and thank you, and that's all you have for me.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's so great to hear about all of these additional programs that you're able to run and had some experience running before and can continue, especially knowing that some of the options will be more limited in the coming year through the federal nutrition program. So it's great that you're able to offer that support to your kids and families. And also pretty cool that you, I guess, got a practice run for a lot of your operations starting in March when you had a more limited number of students coming back. So great to be able to learn from that experience. And now we'll get another perspective with Beth Morris in Lynchburg. So Beth, I will let you take it from here.
All right, well, thank you for having me. And my hat goes off to anybody that is listening today that has made it through to be here. And you're all heroes. And I think this has been I think one of the most challenging, but really one of the most rewarding experiences in my 20 years of directing food service operations. I am the Director of School Nutrition for Lynchburg City Schools. Next slide. Lynchburg is located in Central Virginia. We're about 3 hours south of Washington, D.C., and about 2 hours west of the capital, Richmond. The city proper has a population of just over 80,000. The school division is a urban suburban school division with an enrollment of about 8,000 students who are enrolled in one of our 20 schools. We have one dedicated pre-kindergarten program. We have 11 elementary schools. We have 3 middle schools, 2 high schools. We have one special ed program, and then we have 2 alternative ed programs. We are division-wide community eligibility provision with 58% of our students directly certified for free meals. Okay, for the 2020-2021 school year, we operated, I think the greatest challenge was operating the multiple models that we did, but I am very proud of my staff for really accommodating our children throughout this past year in the many different locations they were, and in the many different models we provided, certainly with our #1 priority is the safety of all who were involved in the meal service and receiving of. We did operate the summer food service program. Our calendar year started on August 24th, and unfortunately, we didn't get the USDA memo until after we had begun that the summer food service program was going to be allowed to run through the school year. So we had a week that we were operating the national school lunch program, and then very quickly, right after Labor Day, switched to the summer food service program. When school closure started in March, we immediately partnered with our transportation department and operated all of our 65 buses traveling across the city to deliver meals. We identified 4 of our secondary schools to be operating as our central kitchens, as well as those were the sites where we operated our curbside pickup. And then we have partners in our community, our Parks and Rec, our YMCA, who open their community centers and their operations to allow students who were going to be remote, and we provided meals to them. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays were our delivery dates. During our 100% remote, but with our affiliate sites, we were providing and delivering meals 5 days a week. Our meals included breakfast and lunch under the summer food service program, and we also offered snack and supper under CACFP. And so on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we were able to provide a hot entree or a hot meal, and then the subsequent items were either shelf stable or cold. We did not provide any meals that had to be reheated by our customers, as we didn't want to assume that that would be a possibility for all of our customers. We knew it had been very much a priority of our school board to get our kids back in school as quickly as possible when it was determined to be safe, and we had mitigation plans in place that would allow students to come back safely. And that actually happened the first week in October, when we started bringing back our elementary school students. They were there for 2 weeks, and then we brought back middle school students and for 2 weeks, and then we brought back our high school students at the end of October. We were on an A-B grouping, with Group A coming in 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and Group B coming in on Thursdays and Fridays, with Monday being a extensive cleaning day and a prep day for my staff. We had 60% of our students chose to return, and we had space. We also had to look at spacing on the buses, which was a real determination of how many students we could have come back into our schools, because many of our students do rely on our bus transportation to get to and from school. We had 60% of our kids that were in that hybrid model, but 40% of our students chose to remain remote. So at that point, we had meal service for each one of our school sites. We continued our curbside pickup for our remote students, and we continued our providing and delivering food to our affiliate sites. Go to the next slide. And I want to stress the importance of the communication that I had with our building administrators, mainly our principals or their designee. In the summer of 2020, knowing that our school board was very, very adamant about getting kids back into schools, I met with each one of the school principals individually, walked through the school with them, and devised a meal service plan for each school. And the diagram or the table to the left is just one example of a meeting and my meeting notes after meeting with the principal at R.S. Payne Elementary School. A building with three levels, and really having to look at the number of staff that would be needed to do what the principal had in mind for service. This particular school, they wanted to do grab and go breakfast, taking it directly to the classroom, and then at lunch, they wanted all of the meals to be delivered to the individual classrooms. Through CARES funds, we were able to procure the carts that I'm showing here on the right, the Cambro Flex Station, which we use for our grab and go breakfasts in the morning, as well as at the end of the 2 days that the students were in school. They were going to be out of school for 3 days. So as they left on either Wednesday or Friday, we packed meals for them to take home for those 3 days that they would be learning remotely. So we use those flex carts for that as well. And then these Cambro Pro carts are just a godsend in that we were able to pack both cold items in the lower shelving and keep those items that were meant to be hot in the upper section, and move those holding carts throughout the buildings, or position them in a strategic place in the hallways where kids could get their meals delivered by my staff. Next slide. So for knowing again that we were going to be going back to school, didn't know when back in the summer, but knew it was going to happen. And a consequence of that was going to be that we would no longer have our buses to deliver meals and get them to the kids as close to their homes as possible. As I said before, many of our students rely on transportation to get to and from school. So I knew that we were going to be having a gap in being able to meet the needs of many of our remote students. So I applied for a grant through No Kid Hungry, and having received that grant, we purchased a van. We had it designed and wrapped, and that allowed us to provide home delivery to students who requested it. We used a Google survey. We sent that out specifically. We were able to target those remote students through our student management software. Sent out a survey asking if they desired meals. And it was going to be dependent on the number of responses that we received, but we did receive over 250 responses. We only had one van and one driver, and as very much of a get-go person and gung-ho as he was, there was no way he was going to be able to deliver to 250 households in a day. So we broke that up into four unique routes: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And each delivery was a 7-day meal box. Included in that were three meals per day, and a snack daily, and a gallon of milk. And we used 4 of our secondary schools. We didn't want to inundate one school with having to produce all of those meals. It really was a labor of love to coordinate that. So each one of the schools took turns or had a designated day that it was their day to produce the meal boxes. And as I said, we served 250, just over 250 students through the end of the school year. And coming into 2021, 2022, we are intending to go back to school 5 days, and we start on August 11th. We will be operating the seamless summer option for breakfast and lunch. And we do, as much as we are, as much as we know now, we will be offering after school activities and sports. So we do plan to to return to what we have done in the past, and that is to have on-site CACFP meal service, and we will provide our supper and then and snack along with that. And using the same system that I used going into return to learn in 2021, I have had meetings with each one of the principals going into this school year, and we have again devised and changed up some the meal service model. Again, very important to have that one-on-one so that the principals can hear your challenges and your expertise in bringing to the table what meal service is going to mean, given the safety mitigation plans that may be in place. We may need to have longer lunch periods. What is your look for classroom service versus cafeteria service, and what will be needed for that? We have developed or initiated for the first time a virtual academy, and we have at this time just under 300 students that have enrolled in the virtual academy, and it is just as it says it or sounds it is students that will be learning from home. And we will be using our home delivery system just as we did for our remote learners last year. Very shortly after tomorrow, as the calendar turns over to the 2021-2022 calendar year, we will be targeting those virtual learners, asking them if they were interested in participating in the home delivery, and developing the routes to make those home deliveries at that time. And finally, I just wanted to touch on our meal planning. Lynchburg City Schools and under my direction, we have traditionally had a 2-week cycle menu. It allows for the most appealing and the most popular items to be menued. We are looking at, because many of our schools are looking at having grab and go from the cafeteria and going back to their classrooms to eat. We are having to look at what items we are serving that are conducive to that. To have a student take a tray or take a covered to-go container back to their classroom. But one thing that we have experienced this past year is a surplus of USDA commodity. Since we had already placed our orders prior to COVID hitting, we are wanting very much to utilize our USDA inventory that has carried over from last year. So our 2-week cycle menu again allows inventory control. It allows for us to offer the most popular items to our students. We are reducing our selections, again trying to maintain inventory management. In our high schools, we would usually have 8 entrees. We are offering 5. In our middle schools, we would usually have 6. We're offering 4. And in our elementary schools, we would usually have 4, and we're offering 3. Again, looking at items that are most appealing to our students, but also are conducive to the many different models that we may have to serve under. And I think if we've learned anything in this past year, it's that we can flip on a dime. We're very good at it. And I think we have experienced and become very proficient in the various models, whether that is serving off of a bus, serving curbside, delivering to home. So if there is a reason to backtrack and have to go back to any of the previous models, I think my staff will be ready. Again, my hat is off to my staff, to all of you and your staffs for doing, I'm sure, what is very similar to what Lynchburg City Schools has been doing in this past year and intends to march forward doing in 2021, 2022. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Beth, for sharing. And I think you raised so many great points, especially about working with your principals and explaining what your limitations are. I think that's so important going into the school year. You'd think they might all understand after having gone through the last year with you, but it certainly doesn't hurt to bring it up again, and especially as there may be staff transitions at the principal level too. It's a good reminder to go back and have those conversations. So with that, Laura, if you want to come back on to, I have a few questions for you, and I'll take this opportunity now to remind all of you listening to please start typing your questions. We've already gotten several, so if you want to get in the queue to have your question answered, get in line now. But just to start off, have either of you gotten any pushback about operating the seamless summer option for this coming year? And I'll say, if not, is there anything that you attribute that to? Beth, do you want to start off?
I think some of the challenges my challenges have been just keeping straight what we're doing. And we've gotten very good at offering SFSP and offering CACFP. We have never done SSO before, but to our customers, they don't really care. All they really are looking at is the end result, and that's nutritious meals and the accessibility to them. And because we're division-wide CEP and would be free universally, regardless of the environment that we're in now, we don't have those issues that a school may have that otherwise would be collecting applications and using that information for various other programs.
Thanks, Beth. And Laura, I know you don't have any schools on CEP, and you did mention having to collect those applications. So do you want to speak a little bit about the decision to go with Seamless Summer, as well as, again, anything you're doing to really encourage those applications?
So we've always run Seamless Summer feeding, so that's not going to make a change for us, which is pretty nice, pretty easy. But the challenging is not being CEP, and that's a district decision. So we just keep on collecting applications, and so we send out outcalls, we send out emails, we send out as much as we can, Facebook, social media, Twitter, anything that you can think of, we've done. But I'm hoping that the back to school teacher night is going to help us alleviate some of that this year, because we didn't have that opportunity last year. So that's one of our biggest day where we received the majority of our applications.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm glad you'll have that opportunity. And I will also include this when we go through some resources at the end, but I do want to note there are a lot of misconceptions out there about free and reduced price eligibility applications when it comes to education funding. Most states don't actually need those forms for education funding purposes. It's not needed for Title I. So we have a resource that goes through this. And if you are in one of the states that really does need those forms for state education funding, we have a toolkit with some resources to help you get either the free and reduced price form or an alternative income form in. So I do want to mention that. I know it is a source of stress for many of you out there, and especially if you're in one of the 19 states that really do rely on income forms for state ed funding. So with that, I have at least one other question that I want to make sure I ask before we turn it over to the audience, and that is contingency planning. I know we're all hoping for the best and that the school year will be mainly normal, and for all those kids who have chosen in-person learning, that it'll go smoothly for them. But if the past year and a half has taught us anything, it's that plans don't always happen the way you intend them. So Laura, I know you have had some experience from the spring. Do you want to talk about, what you do if you're going to have to deal with student quarantines or anything like that?
So we're still going to have our grab and go sites. So students will still have the opportunity, the families, to come and pick up their meals. When sometimes they close a classroom, sometimes students are transferred, sometimes all students are sent home. But I think having the opportunity for the grab and go, that's going to support that. And sometimes when we hear on time that the students are going home, since we're already packing ahead, we send them out with a meal. But we don't always get the notification, so that's challenging.
Yeah. And Beth, do you want to speak to any contingency planning that you're doing for the coming school year?
We will be doing, following the same models that we had this past year. If we had a school that needed to close because of an outbreak or quarantine, we would open curbside at that location or locations. If we had division-wide closure, then we would get back on buses. And again, we have over this past year, again, through CARES funds, as well as just our own operating funds, purchased many carry and holding containers, so that we have an overabundance of those to get back on buses. So again, I just am amazed at what my staff is being able to do in a day's notice. I'll get a call at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening saying we're closed for tomorrow. What are we going to do? And get with the transportation, and the buses show up at the schools, and off we go. But I'm really knocking on wood in my office that's not the case, but we are prepared, and we've had it. I won't say it's a dry run because it was a real run, but we've gotten used to, what it takes to meet the kids, and we're dedicated to doing that.
That's great. I think you both provide some inspiring examples, and I hope it gets everyone here today thinking about what they can do to be ready should things change, as they may unfortunately change during the school year. So with that, I'm going to invite Chelsea back on to help with some Q&A. I have seen questions flowing in, so thank you. We'll try to get to as many of these as possible. Please don't stop writing in your questions. We may get to it, or we could follow up later, so don't let that stop you. But Chelsea, do you want to give us some questions?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick us off. There are a lot of questions about the waivers and meal options that are available this next school year. So I'm going to give those to you, Carolyn, to start us off here. And the first question we had come in was about CACFP, the after school meal program. And the question, do all schools qualify? Is there an area eligibility waiver that qualifies all schools as being able to participate?
Yes, great question. So there is an area eligibility waiver. And again, because USDA wrote it very broadly, that does mean that all schools, as well as all community sites anywhere, can qualify for CACFP at risk for the coming year. So you do need to kind of apply for the waiver, or go through whatever your state's process is. It isn't necessarily automatic. And then obviously you would need to apply and get that site approved, but area eligibility would not be a factor in that. So great question.
All right, following on that waiver trend, can you clarify the SSO cannot operate on weekends and CACFP can serve on weekends, and kind of what that breakdown is of when one can be used over the other?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is confusing because it's different from how this past school year and a half has worked. So in the Q&A guidance that USDA put out back on June 11th, they did say explicitly, no, SSO cannot be used to serve meals on weekends or holidays during this coming school year. So it's already a waiver for Seamless Summer to be able to operate during the school year. So they kind of had some, I guess, wiggle room in how they implemented that waiver. So ordinarily during the summer, you can serve meals on weekends through SSO, but they've kind of set the limit that for this school year, when it's unusual for you to be able to serve meals through SSO, you can only do it like Monday through Friday school days. That's a CACFP at risk is always available to serve meals on weekends during the school year. So can't do CSEFP at risk this summer or any summer, unless you're around school, can of worms, we won't get into today. But CSEFP at risk is always an option for weekends, holidays, and breaks alongside enrichment activities. So that is still a requirement. But that is an option in the coming school year to serve meals on weekends. So great if there is going to be any in-person tutoring or kind of like remedial programs going on in your schools, definitely look to CSEFP at risk for those in-person programs and work with your state agency on how you might be able to take advantage of the non-congregate and related waivers to do any non-congregate meal service through CSEFP at risk.
Great. I think you answered another one of our questions right there at the end as well. There's asking if CSEFP meals can be taken off-site. And so that's what the non-congregate means, correctly, that they can take those meals to go.
Right, so that waiver is available, but work with your state agency because it does have that gray area caveat of to the extent for the duration needed.
We got a question about kind of timing of some of these waivers. And so given that the federal fiscal year doesn't restart until October, will SFSP be allowed to operate during the school year during August and September? Or is that not an option?
Schools will be able to pick up and operate SFSP continuously. So if you're operating SFSP, oh, wait, I got mixed up. The question is about SFSP in August and September.
Yeah, so in the beginning of the school year.
Okay, SFSP has to stop when the school year begins. So chances are your school year is probably going to begin before September 30th, in which case, you know, this fiscal year question is a little immaterial. SFSP has to stop when the school year begins, whenever it begins in your area. So if it's August 11th, like it is in Lynchburg, that's when all SFSP service has to stop, whether it's run by the school or a community organization. And you would transition to seamless summer for the school year. Or if you wanted to go back to NSLP, you could, but no SFSP after the official school year begins in your area.
One kind of final clarifying question around all of these, no matter which program that a school chooses, will meals be at no cost to students through the 2021-2022 school year?
If a school chooses NSLP and school lunch or school breakfast, then there could be a cost to students. However, I don't know why you would do that when you have the option to serve through seamless summer and get those SFSP rates and be able to serve free meals to all students. But schools do have the option to do NSLP. So it is not a guarantee necessarily nationwide every single student would have access to meals at no charge. But if you're doing seamless summer, then yes, and you can do seamless summer everywhere. So please do it.
Great. I believe those were all of the waiver questions. So I'll move into some questions for our other panelists here. First up was regarding, Laura, your weekend backpack program. And they're just asking kind of what food do you use and where do you get the revenue to fund that program?
So the food that we get there on Fridays when I go to the St. Mary's Food Bank to pick up for our weekend backpack programs, I pick up extra stuff to store for our food pantry. And it's very limited because we're very space limited. So that's where I get the food from. And let's say we use some of that food throughout the week when we had an emergency family reach out. Then the following time I go, I pick up some more and restock it. So it's all donated from the food bank.
Great. It's a great partnership that you have there. A question for you, Beth. People are wondering if students are eating in the cafeteria or if they're eating in classrooms, or is it kind of a mix throughout your school?
This past year, we only had 2 schools that use the cafeteria and some very small schools that they could put limited numbers of kids in them and had various lunch times. As I said, there's very much an interest on my part, and I am really advocating for getting the students back in the cafeteria. If talking about challenges, we are, and I know we're not in a bubble here, having challenges in hiring. That's been a real challenge for us in finding qualified candidates. And so it is more labor intensive to serve meals in the classroom, requires more labor. So we are, and that's a discussion that I'm having when I'm talking to the principals, is that, these are our limitations, these are our resources, and they, I think having that personal conversation, there can then be an appreciation for how we can compromise and work together. So it will be a combination. We have, and our principals are human. They've had their own experiences with COVID. So we may have a principal that's, that's had somebody that's passed away in their family, and they're going to be, kids are in the classroom, kids are in the classroom. Whereas we, another principal, may be more, flexible. So we still are leading with care and trying to understand that people are coming from different experiences with the pandemic.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I think we only have a couple more minutes left, so I'm going to ask another question, but it's kind of to both of you. Are either of your school districts trying to connect parents to other federal nutrition programs like SNAP and WIC, or any sort of outreach around that?
In Tolleson, we have a community liaison, and she is the one, like, we refer them to, if they come directly to us, we refer them to her, and she helps them through that process with the SNAP program and Medi-Cal and all of that, those federal programs.
We have on staff social workers in our schools that work with our families and our children, and we've been very much a part of the pandemic EBT program, and monthly here in Virginia. And I think that that's made more families aware of the extended benefits available through the Virginia Department of Social Services.
Great, thank you. That's great work to hear that's going on in your schools as well. I think one final question before we go to the wrap up of Carolyn is just, how has paperwork and tracking and all of that behind the scenes work that you guys have been going on? Do you have any suggestions on how to keep meal tracking with less paperwork and cut down on that workload any?
For Tolleson, we have we just deal with it. Making a hard copy for a master on filling out those ADE or our state tally sheets and all that stuff. I do know that you're also able to use the POS, but at Tolleson, as of now, we've chosen not to. And I think that's a go around for the paperwork, but we're sticking to to using the tally sheets right now. And even though, I think it only goes to 160, so we have to have more and more tally sheets for the one day, but we're making it happen.
We are as well, using the hard copy, and it is. I have a behind the scenes crew, a very able staff, a finance manager that collects all of those tallies in the weekly consolidation form, and does all of our state claiming. We just need another storage space, because we're required to keep all that for 3 years. So if we could just, we're requesting additional space in the warehouse. But there is no question in operating, two programs simultaneously, you have two sets of, administrative burden and two sets of administrative paperwork. But again, as I said at the start of my presentation, I've never been prouder, I've never been, more committed than I have been this past year. And with all the challenges that we've faced, and knowing how the challenges that so many people have faced that are real, keeping up with the paperwork is, just a little hiccup versus, some of the things that our families are dealing with.
Well, it's a great reminder and note as we wrap up here. So again, I do just want to quickly highlight some of our more recent resources. The very first one there is a link to that toolkit for those of you who do need to collect free and reduced price meal applications or alternative income forms. It has some more information about that whole process. So again, you'll get this slide deck as follow-up. We'll send out these links. I think we'll also link out to that June 11th Q&A memo because there have been a few questions about things related to that. And as always, you can go to our website, bestpractices.nogetHungry.org for these and all sorts of other resources. We've got my contact information up there as well as our general account, which Chelsea checks. So you have lots of ways to get in touch with us. If we did not get to your question today, but thank you so much for the active participation. We'll do our best to follow up on all of these. And a huge thanks to Beth and Laura for taking the time out of all the busy planning this summer to talk about what they've done over the past year and a half and what their plans are for the coming year. It's so helpful to hear what's happening on the ground. So thank you again, and thanks to all of you on the call for all you've done for kids.